So this is your opportunity to ask some questions, and ask some questions of the group. What we've heard this morning is an incredible melange of innovation, of people striving in the next scientific frontier. We've heard references to systems, be the Toyota system, be the BTOES production system, and we've had some great lessons from history. And I guess my first question to the panel to think about a little bit is, so where do we create that link between the past and the future? How do we make that a positive connection? Any thoughts?
So when you're talking about the past and the future in terms of employees, in terms of your workforce, so we're trying to implement changes. Typically, people have been doing it for a long time. It's much more difficult to deviate from the ways they've been used to doing it for a long time. It's easier to do it with new employees. But the problem is, if you don't do change in strategy and training, then the new employees, which are much more open to change, will start adopting the same philosophies and management styles as the older ones. And then when they see that the people that are being promoted, going to management or directors, have certain traits, they assume that these are the traits needed for the company to be successful. And that's been successful probably in certain times, but if you want to adapt with the times, that might not be the best time or the best methodologies or governance models to be going forward. So I think you need to be careful how you start creating the new employees, but implement maybe training methods, training guidelines. It's having mentors that actually guide them in these new ways of doing it. So you start breaking up the old generation from the old generation. And if you have to change the strategy, it's always easier implemented in the young workforce coming to the jobs.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is when you're thinking of driving change, remember this is not something new that's happening. It's, humanity has evolved over the generations, and if you look at any aspect of life, whether it is how corporations have evolved, how human beings have evolved, how families have evolved, change is a perennial part of us. And when I have been driving transformations and I've studied this subject more, what I realize is there are millions of people who've done it better than me. There are millions of experiences that I've had, good, bad, or ugly, which we can learn from. And I think it's very important to imbibe those and share it with others in the organization, not just for today, but also to build that ability in the DNA of the organization to manage change and bring that education about how to handle change through past experiences. So to me, the past, present, and future converge together by the lessons that you have learned on transformation and by sharing those lessons across with others in the organization for the future as well.
Yes, one of the things I'd like to say, because when we were going through many of our changes, what it really involved, to Omar's point, is really trying to teach folks who've been around for a long time a different way of doing something. And there's a risk that those folks are going to say, I spent years building the system and now you're trying to change it, and they don't feel good about that. And what I always try to do is honor that history and tell them, look, we did the best we could at the time with the approach, the philosophy, the tools that we had. And you got us to where we are today as an organization, as a company, and we're very successful. Without what you did, we wouldn't be where we are. Now we're trying to see, can we take the next step? And so it's not about saying what you did is no good and we're getting rid of it and we're going to replace it. It's saying, you got us as far as we are, and we can go even further now. So it's honoring that past, even as you start to build the future.
I have a comment. So when we were on our lean journey, just to build on what Dave said, we had some senior leaders in the company that, as we attempted the BTOES production system pilots, that said, there's no way you're going to get that value out of this approach to manufacturing. And our targets were 50% improvement in quality, 50% improvement in productivity, and 50% reduction in inventory on the line, and 50% reduction in space necessary to manufacture the same volume of components. And this leader said, there's no way you're going to get that. I've been in manufacturing for 25 years here at BTOES, and if there was a better way to do this, don't you think I would have done it by now? And you have to be patient with these individuals. If he was sitting here right now, he'd be telling you this story himself. And his boss was very patient with him. And he will say, this individual will say, more patient than he would have been. He said, I would have fired me by now. And he was my project for a year. This particular individual was my project for a year to make sure he made that transformation in his mind. And today he is one of the biggest evangelists and believers of the BTOES production system and still leads our manufacturing organization today. So patience is also very important in moving from past to future.
Just one thing, I think the most important thing is remember, a lot of times we go into these organizations and people that's been there for years and years, they've done a great job. But reality is, in most cases, things have changed. The environment, talk about the parts themselves or whatever the jobs that they're doing, it may change. The key is to make sure that person does not feel like he's useless, no longer needed. You've got to bring him into the new generation, whatever it takes, it's the education or whatever, to help them to understand. But I think the biggest part of it is just communicating and talking with that person. So many times it's just spending that extra few moments and talking it out, understanding what's going on, and trying to get them to see from a different point of view. And once they see it, they can be your biggest advocate to make a change. Yes.
Fantastic. And I think, so one of my favorite proverbs, I think it's Polish, is that if you dwell in the past, you lose an eye. And if you forget the past, you go blind. And I think that's a really nice way of thinking about some of these things. It's always there, right? Questions or comments from the floor? Please put your hands up. There's one just down here. It's on its way.
This question is for Bobby, but it also relates to what Anu is speaking about. But it's an open question to everyone. Servant leader. It's easier to imagine that in a manufacturing environment. What does that look like to you, Bobby, and others, in a business process where you are not making a widget? How does that translate? And can you use an example of where you've applied that servant leadership model in a business process?
Okay. In most cases, I think that many times leadership may say that they're involved or they're on board. And what happens is they believe it in their mind, but they really truly are not. They're waiting for the next level down to implement change, and they're just there to kind of support it. The reality is you have to figure out what makes the leadership tick. So many times I've been in the office of the CEOs or top people in charge. We just have to have that one-on-one talk. You know, it's not nice all the time, but again, if you want to achieve some certain results, they got to be a part of it. And they got to sell it too. It can't just be words. It's got to be some action behind it. The reality is getting their involvement.
I mean, to me, servant leadership is agnostic of your work environment. Servant leadership is a quality. It's the way you behave. So it is about, are you a person who will coach rather than direct? Are you a person who will seek feedback and learn as you're teaching? Are you a person who will help out? So I've gone through that several times in in all the transformations, and I've never been in manufacturing, always been in financial services. So I'll give you examples from the Agile transformation. There are certain teams who are in the midst of Agile transformation, they're having a lot of challenges. So I'll go and attend their meetings. I'll go attend some of their stand-ups. I'll probably go and talk to the junior most employee to say, okay, what are you hearing? Then I'll go back and talk to the senior leader saying, this is what I'm hearing. Is this the way we could drive change? I've sometimes had to change the way I am driving the transformation because I'm realizing that it's not really working. There are other challenges the employees are facing and they need to address those first before I tell them change the way you work. So it's all about listening, coaching, helping, and it is completely agnostic to the environment. And actually, if you think about being a servant leader, this is very personal to me. But I think I'm becoming a better mother because I'm a servant leader in my office. So it has got nothing to do with your working environment. It's about you being a servant leader.
So I'll add to that, and I think about your comment of be the change and model the change. And my approach is, I don't do the work in the organization. I have a community of lean leaders across the globe. But whenever one of them wants to ask a question or has a problem, I will drop everything. And whether it's I'm at home, whether it's at night, whether it's during the working time, I will drop whatever it is and open the door, let them in, and talk as long as they want to, because I know they're going to go off and continue to carry on the journey and do what it takes to have us be successful as a company. So that's the power of servant leadership: is that coach, mentor, engage, enable folks to go off and do the work of the organization to help it get better.
Yeah, I totally agree with the previous points. I think the key here is leadership. And obviously, if you have authority, you can manage people to do certain things, but they won't be passionate. They won't put the full effort into it. You have to convince them of the value, how they're contributing to it, and what's the big picture. And once they get convinced, the passion will drive them beyond what they can do. I think that is the key here.
Thank you. Fantastic question. Great answers. I could give you a little Lego thing as well. So, 1932, we started our business with a family. It's still a family business. There were 3 things they brought to us. One was, only the best is good enough. The second was, think slow, move fast. And the third was, Lego before ego. And the family modeled that. And because the family modeled that, boy, does the company follow. I saw some more hands up down here, I think. So.
Thank you. Jill Royston with W.L. Gore and Associates. So as we're talking about leadership, and I was curious about internalizing the change. You had mentioned that we have to change ourselves. So just for the panel, I'm curious, as you've gone through leading transformations, were there moments that you could share with us where you had to change how you think, where you had that aha moment, and having that moment actually was the thing that led you to being able to lead others through it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because every now and then people have visions, have guidelines, and they come up with these new initiatives, and sometimes they fail, sometimes they don't. So what makes them successful? What makes them, to be failures? So I think it's people believing and showing the case, showing roadmap, saying this is where we're going, this is the end effects. If you continue with this, this is the success we're going to have, right? And some people sometimes fail to see that. They only see it as something they want to implement for no reason. They don't understand what is the value, the end effect that's going to come out of that. And if you convince people how is that going to happen and how that's going to improve the whole organization, and I think that will make a big difference in trying to implement that vision.
Can I? So internalizing change, I don't know if we spoke afterwards, but I actually had this conversation with a few people this morning during the break. One of the things that I learned through some experience of getting it wrong was that I needed to internalize this idea of viewing value from the customer's perspective. And, which we all tell each other in these conferences, you gotta do it. And I had 2 very particular examples, and I'll try to keep them very brief, where I wasn't doing that, and I was failing pretty badly. And, one of them involved a project that I had helped a team do, and they had gotten fantastic results in a pilot, and they wanted to expand the pilot, and they were running into a ton of resistance. And I was helping them socialize the information, and I went to all the stakeholders, and I showed them run charts, and I showed them data, and I showed them output that said, look, our failure rate is tiny, almost 0. How can you not adopt this pilot? And take it company-wide. And they kept pushing back and kept pushing back. And what I didn't realize was that the data was not the thing that mattered to them. What mattered to them was what did it mean for them from a work perspective? Because it was going to change their world. It was going to move their cheese, as people say, right? It was going to potentially put them in a difficult position if we hadn't done our homework in some other areas. So I banged my head against the wall and I got frustrated and I even lost my temper, and I'm ashamed to say that I didn't behave at my best. But when I went and reflected on it and I realized that the data wasn't the thing they needed. As a customer, what they needed to know was that they were going to be protected in the future. And when I realized what they needed and went and gave them what they needed, that's when the logjam broke. So that's just one example, and I won't tell the other one because it's very similar. But it was when I really internalized this idea that understanding what the customer wants is not just words. You have to really feel it. And I felt it by making a bad mistake and then reflecting on that. And that's when I think that idea of viewing value from the customer's perspective, I internalized it in a way I never had before. So I don't know if that gets to your question, but that was a really important experience for me.
Yes. I think one of the key points is, for myself, is understanding who your audience is. One thing that I've done a lot better job over the years is understanding who that customer is. And thank God for the internet. Prior to going to any organization now, spending some time and doing your homework, understanding what makes them tick. And once you get there, you start spending a lot of time on the shop floor. And the team members themselves, they speak volumes for the company themselves. So once you get that homework in and understand the culture, I think it can prevent you from making a lot of mistakes up front. If you're in Tennessee versus up north, it's a big difference in the geographical location, but the people are different. You got to understand what makes those people tick and what's important to them in most cases.
Yes, I went through an epiphany in 2004 when I was going through my Master Black Belt development and learning all the techniques of advanced statistics and all the tools. And I had to take several elective courses in this program I was going through, and I took 2 weeks back-to-back on change leadership. And I completed those 2 weeks, and they changed my mindset on how to engage in deploying a lean enterprise program. And I went back to the folks that taught this Master Black Belt program, and they were elective courses I went through. I said, if you don't make those mandatory, you're doing a disservice to every Master Black Belt that you train, because those are the tools that are going to make the difference. And since 2004 to today, I've not done one DOE, but I use change leadership and psychology every minute of every day. So focus on change and change management and downplay some of the DOEs, and I think you'll be more successful.
And then following up on Bobby's note about what the customer needs, I think that one of the prime examples is what Apple did with the iPod a while back. It wasn't obviously the first MP3 player, but they significantly emphasized what the customer wanted, and they saw what the gaps and challenges were of the current MP3 players in the market, and they were able to revolutionize a system that actually came up with most of the challenges that the consumers were having. And that turned out to one of the most successful products that actually was a turning point in the company's history.
You know, for me, like change, I mean, I think I've changed so much over the years with, practice of lean and agile. I think first of all, it's just wired in my brain, like reduce waste. So much so that even when I go grocery shopping, I'll be thinking of which aisle should I walk through first so I don't have to walk around. It's just completely wired in my system now. But I think on a personal level, it has changed me too. I've become a lot more open person, much better listener, very humble. I have systems of which my people can give me feedback candidly, and they give me regular feedback. So I'm changing and improving as I give them feedback and improve. The other area where I've changed dramatically is in this whole concept of experimenting and failing. I was the kind of person who thought we should have a clear plan, we should go make it happen, why can't we achieve our goals? And now begin to think very differently, saying you must have a roadmap, you must have a vision, but keep experimenting and learning. So I think it's going back to that thing about making personal. It has changed me internally dramatically.
Fantastic set of answers. Next question. Do we have any hands? Thank you. One of the things I watch out for, by the way, is that if I find myself smoking too much of my own dope, then I know it's time to stop. That's kind of my gauge. And the other piece is that I always used to think that I was telling people their vapors were ugly, and now what I know is I have to help them understand that they're ugly, and we can do something about it. Question.
Doug Stratton from Monash Corporation. I think this is the first time I've ever asked the question at one of these events, but the question I have is, just to frame it, when we talk about introducing people to CI, or continuous improvement, or lean, we're always talking about somebody who's not aware of it, or doesn't understand it, and you're trying to explain it to somebody. The situation we have is we have a senior executive who fully believes that he's Mahatma Gandhi, and he's doing operational excellence. And the problem we have is we're tasked with driving it, and we're not. And so have you run into that, and anything you could do to recommend?
So what is the challenge? The challenge is this gentleman thinks he's driving it, and he's not letting you drive it. What is the real challenge?
The challenge. The challenge is that he fully believes he has an operational excellence program, but he doesn't.
So Mahatma Gandhi turns out to be Homer Simpson.
It's kind of like Mahatma Gandhi is Stalin, right?
Okay, that's much worse.
I think the challenge is just the same as you would have with any other employee. I think the good thing is he wants to help drive change, so that's awesome. And especially if he's a senior leader, that's great. It might be useful for someone like that person to actually help him go to conferences like this and see how other organizations are driving change. Maybe go to other organizations, go to Toyota, I've been there thrice actually, and talk to other executives, see how they're driving change. And what you may then slowly make him realize that your energy and passion is great, but you don't have the operating principles or systems or frameworks to make it happen and sustain it. So I think that's the real challenge. There's a plus to it. It's great that he's behind it. It's just the approach and the knowledge about how to drive change may be lacking. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if this would work in your situation, but my philosophy has always been go where the energy is. And so I would not even work with this individual and go work around him and in different parts of the organization, create success around him so that he begins to see that there's opportunity there that he's missing. I've done this at BTOES, and at one point in time, this individual I was ignoring, purposely ignoring, what do you think happened? He got upset that I was ignoring him and wanted to be engaged in our lean journey. And so, I don't know if that works in your situation, but go where the energy is, work in the parts of the organization that can make change happen and make progress. And hopefully, you will influence this person indirectly.
I see this sometimes, not very often, but I'm personally supporting the hospital when they have a director of continuous improvement. They have 2 or 3 managers, and I'm thinking, why are they asking Toyota to come in and get involved? And I think it's a big issue with majority is their training. They have not had the training. They've been appointed to a position, but they have not had the training that's needed to make the change. And so, I mean, the things we discussed today is very important. And if you got someone in that position, make sure they have the correct, all the tools they need to be able to do the job. Because many of them, they're there, they're drawing the pay, and they're not making a difference. And a lot of times, the employees are seeking outside support, and it does create conflicts when you walk in the door and you see that type of situation is happening. The big issue.
So sometimes also it has to come from his higher management. Sometimes maybe he's not aware of the feedback. At NASA we have something called skip level management. So you skip that level, you go to a higher level, and explain what's going on, and with consistent feedback from different people in the organization, the higher executives will be able to implement a training plan or maybe adjustment plan for him to change his way of management or leadership, and that might be some effective way to do it.
Yeah, so I'm hesitant to give too much advice, not knowing your situation deeply, but one way I could consider approaching a leader who is doing what you're describing is, not really try to move them, but rather, if they feel like they have an effective CI program or continuous improvement program that they're leading, you might ask them if you could help them measure the effectiveness of their program, which they think they have, which might allow you to shine some light on maybe lack of progress, and then you lever that into, maybe I could help you make some progress. So rather than say you're doing it all wrong, say, let's see if we can track the progress that we're making on the program that you've got, and then let the numbers speak for themselves. I don't know if it'll work, but it's an idea.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm unfortunately going to have to bring this session to a close, but please join me in thanking Bobby and Anu and Jeff.